to be naturalistic, more ritualistic. The parts required an interpretation that was stylized rather than psychological. Yet, despite his increasing involvement, he refused to give any hint to the actors of the meaning of what was taking place on the stage. Beckett would always insist upon taking such a leading role in the production of his plays. This can in part be explained by his origins as a novelist, where the medium is simply words of which the writer remains in complete control. Also, there is no doubt that Beckett's plays did, at least initially, require a certain mannered production in order to achieve their own conviction. After all, audiences had simply never seen anything like this before. Later, however, Beckett's mania for control would have a cramping effect on his dramatic works, and even today his trustees, who hold the performance rights, retain a severely restrictive control over productions of his work. Beckett's plays will surely take on a new, unforeseen lease of life when this control is relaxed. The first performance of Waiting for Godot was staged on January 5, 1953. Beckett stayed away, unable to face the ordeal of witnessing his own first night. The audience, seated on 230 folding chairs in a cramped space, was bewildered, but a number of perceptive critics immediately recognized the play's originality and worth. Beckett was acclaimed as one of today's best playwrights, and it was predicted that his play would be spoken of for a long time. Waiting for Godot struck a chord with the post-war nihilism of existentialist Paris, where Jean-Paul Sartre was the philosopher-king, and Juliette Greco's fatalistic songs were all the rage in the cafes of the Latin Quarter. The audiences at Waiting for Godot remained baffled, but continued to fill the tiny theatre night after night. Soon, all Paris knew that something special was taking place at the Théâtre de Babylone. The tide had finally turned, and Beckett was on his way to achieving the recognition of which he had so long secretly dreamt. Productions of Waiting for Godot were soon opening in London, 1955, the United States, 1956, and then throughout the world. International reactions were remarkably similar. Packed audiences were bewildered, and often the theatres were more than half empty after intermission. But many critics recognized that this was the play that somehow seemed appropriate to our age. The drama of the two tramps who did nothing, twice over, was more than a reflection of fashionable Parisian angst. It touched something in the very soul of modern humanity. Night after night, audiences filled the theatres, to be bewildered and boo, or to have their eyes opened and applaud. Controversy rather than acceptance was the initial ingredient that contributed to Beckett's success, and soon Waiting for Godot was being performed on avant-garde stages and small theatres from Santiago to Stockholm. In the process of becoming an underground hit, it gradually established itself as a permanent classic of the world's theatre repertoire. Beckett, meanwhile, returned to his desk. Following the completion of his trilogy, he produced 13 brief texts for nothing, which he referred to as an afterbirth of the trilogy. The monologist prose is similar, as well as being similarly difficult and rewarding, to that of the unnameable. The voice questions its condition, attempting to grasp the ever-elusive truth of its being. The philosophical quest resembles a snake attempting to swallow its own tail. "No voice ever but in my life," it says, "if speaking of me one can speak of life, and it can." As ever, even at his most impenetrable, Beckett's words are seldom devoid of graveyard humour. "Did I try everything, ferret in every hold, secretly, silently, patiently, listening? I'm in earnest, as so often. I'd like to be sure I left no stone unturned before reporting me missing and giving up." The attempt remains as ambitious as ever. "I'm the clerk, I'm the scribe at the hearings of what cause I know not. Why want it to be mine? I don't want it." Or, "Where would I go if I could go? Who would I be if I could be? What would I say if I had a voice? Who says this, saying it's me?" After these texts, Beckett returned once more to the theatre, eventually producing his second major drama, Endgame. This features the dying Hamm in black glasses, confined to his wheelchair. He is attended by his servant, the recalcitrant Clov. Also present are Hamm's mother and father, Nag and Nell, who inhabit dustbins, having apparently lost their legs many years previously in a bicycle accident. The characters' roles are indicated by their names. Hamm, hammer. Clov, clou is French for nail. Nag, nagel is German for nail. And knell, Irish accent, nail. There are, of course, many other allusions. Ham, as in ham actor, nag to nag, even knell, as in the tolling of the death knell. All the action takes place in a claustrophobic spherical structure with two high windows resembling the inside of a skull. The outside of the skull appears to be a landscape after a nuclear holocaust. Thus the characters may also be seen as the elements of a mind as it faces death and final extinction. So far so bad. The title Endgame refers to the last moves in a chess game, with Hamm as the king desperately trying to avoid the checkmate of death. This is all very unrelentingly grim, and although the play certainly has its humorous moments, the atmosphere remains persistently oppressive, not to say depressive. Unlike Waiting for Godot, there is no looseness, either of action or inaction, resonance or repartee. The author is more in control, and yet the words have none of the bleak memorableness of Godot. This said, the play is not without its moments. Clov, despairingly. Ah. Hamm, something from your heart? Clov, my heart? Hamm, a few words from your heart. Pause. Clov, fixed gaze, tonelessly, towards auditorium. They said to me, that's love, yes, yes, no doubt, now you see how. Hamm, articulate. Clov, as before. How easy it is. They said to me, that's friendship, yes, yes, no question, you've found it. They said to me, here's the place, stop, raise your head and look at all that beauty, that order. They said to me, come now, you're not a brute beast. Think upon these things and you'll see how all becomes clear and simple. They said to me, what skilled attention they get, all these dying of their wounds. Hamm, enough! The unremitting bleakness of Endgame was not so well received, but it is now generally regarded as a masterpiece of its kind, second, though a long way second, to Waiting for Godot. As if to show that he was not entirely lost in depression, Beckett now turned to another divertissement, a brief dramatic work entitled Crap's Last Tape. This was written in English, and Beckett's easy familiarity with his mother tongue enabled his imagination to take wing. Crap's Last Tape is too short to be considered a major masterpiece. The entire script, including copious stage directions, covers just 9 pages, but in other aspects it may well be compared to Waiting for Godot. It is also the most accessible and most obviously personal, in the literal realistic sense, of his later works. The central and only appearing character is Crap, an echo of the name given by Beckett to the autobiographical character in his earlier failed play Eleutheria. But here Crap takes on a life of his own. No longer derisively autobiographical, he becomes intensely so, and in doing so transcends his particularities to become one of the great archetypal characters of the modern stage. He is by turns funny, pathetic, farcical, and deeply touching, all in the space of such a brief stage life. The curtain goes up to reveal Crap in his sparse and decrepit den. He is an old man playing over and again the tapes that he has recorded during his life. These tapes are a form of journal, in which he describes what has happened to him and also summarizes his current attitude to life. We hear his resolutions, his criticisms of his former self, his regrets. We witness the older Crap listening to the younger man recounting his most poignant memories, the death of his mother, his love, his great moments of inspiration. These minutes on stage imply volumes, evoking an entire life as well as the feeling of its unfulfillment and irretrievability. The older Crap and the younger Crap both speak. They are two different people, the one unheard by the other, the one a stranger to the other. We hear their separate voices, but there is no dialogue. They can never speak to each other. The past can never be repaired. Crap, playing and rewinding the spools of his ancient recording machine, meditatively munching on his bananas, occasionally disappearing into the darkness for a swig of hooch, is one of the most moving figures of the modern stage, despite his brief stage life, which remains in the mind long after it is witnessed. At the end we leave the aged Crap with his sour cud and iron stool, listening bitterly to the callow judgment and hope of his younger voice on the tape. Tape. Perhaps my best years are gone, when there was a chance of happiness. But I wouldn't want this on the stage. Beckett would always insist upon taking such a leading role in the production of his plays. This can in part be explained by his origins as a novelist, where the medium is simply words of which the writer remains in complete control. Also, to be naturalistic, more ritualistic. The parts required an interpretation that was stylized rather than psychological. Yet, despite his increasing involvement, he refused to give any hint to the actors of the meaning of what was taking place. Would have a cramping effect on his dramatic works, and even today his trustees, who hold the performance rights, retain a severely restrictive control over productions of his work. Beckett's plays will surely take on a new, unforeseen lease of life when this control is relaxed. The first performance of Waiting for Godot was staged on January 5, 1953. Beckett stayed away, unable to face the ordeal of witnessing his own first night. The audience seated on... There is no doubt that Beckett's plays did, at least initially, require a certain mannered production in order to achieve their own conviction. After all, audiences had simply never seen anything like this before. Later, however, Beckett's mania for control